Great. There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good midday, wherever you are. We're close. We're very close in our mission and the same vision that we'll have, which is to bring humanity and dignity to people who are suffering at this moment and who have suffered through so many years, just exercising their own rights and seeking a better life and safety. So if you can we here in Tucson with the Good Samaritans of Tucson, we practice a moment of silence every time we start our meetings, and it's to honor our friends who have uh, died during the crossing or who are coming. And now we have to extend our moment of silence to our friends across the globe because as we each of us know, this is not only locally, it's not only happening in our country, this is all over the world because our world is in so much trouble. So let's extend our love and prayers to each of them. So if you can join me for a moment of silence, please. Thank you so much. And as we are going to continue our so important conversation, I hope that it opens and continue to open our minds, our hearts, into the space that we can all share because our group is growing and I hope that it is also growing in your communities where if you are sitting across the table with someone that you don't even know but you have something that it distinguishes you from that person, maybe a button, maybe a purse, maybe something, and you can start a conversation. I tell you, I carry with me this beautiful red dot and it starts a conversation. People ask, "Oh, what is that necklace you wear?" And I say, "This is to honor the people who have died in Arizona and New Mexico areas." And then we start that conversation. Oh, how they die? Oh, I didn't know that. And then, oh, I live in Tucson for 25 years and I didn't know people's dying in my backyard. So those are very important moments for us to start those conversations. But thank you, Sarah, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Dora, always for your beautiful heart and your glorious welcome. And on the story of the red dot, this is what I offer to people. And where have you seen that before? On my book. I got it tattooed onto my skin. And people ask me all the time, what do your birds represent? And I say, that's my wish for freedom of movement for all. So yeah, my daughter got it onto her back too. So that's a wonderful way to start a conversation. Now, speaking of conversations, we've lost Kate Scott, who was going to join us from the from what do you call it, Camp Huachuca? Fort Huachuca, which is somewhat central to the narrative that I hope for us to touch on today. So she was going to share with us how border militarization in particular affects the animal kingdom and water and ecosystems. So I invite the rest of our panelists to and guests to hit upon that in her absence. But for now, um, really quick introduction of our panelists today. James here from the New Mexican area of the borderlands. Dylan in the El Paso region, Dylan Corbett with Hope Border Institute. Sorry, James Holman is with Battalion Search and Rescue. Dora, of course, from the Tucson sector. And we have America with us as well, who is also in Texas in the Eagle Pass area. And then I also see some Brownsvillians have joined us. Happy to hear from you guys. When, if if the topic of Brownsville needs to be addressed. And we have some Californians from LA. Not, I was hoping we could get somebody from San Diego. But basically, our topic today is there is no invasion, there is only militarization. And I can attest, having traveled the 2,000-mile line back and forth for several years to research my book during the period of time when we did have massive numbers of people showing up every day. Even then, it never felt like an invasion to me. You know, even then, the quantity of people, while it might have been a lot, for the most part were orderly and calm and hungry and polite. Um, not talking about the cartels, but the people in motion. And yet, our country has, for decades, never responded to the arrival of new people with the question, why are they coming and why so many? Never necessarily probed the reasons for people moving from the various countries that become represented. The answer is always, how do we stop them? And this has been going on for years with Operation Gatekeeper in 1994, Operation, what was it called in the 70s under Nixon? The Secure Borders Act, every president has added some bit of wall, but we're in a whole different situation now. And so I'd really like to hear from our guests one at a time with the starting question. If each of you in turn, let's keep it for the minute to Dylan, James, and Dora. If each of you can confirm, yes or no, is there an invasion at the border? And follow that up with what you are seeing right now, today, in the last 3 months, 100+ days, vis-a-vis the buildup of the military in our borderlands. Let's go east to west. Dylan, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Yeah, of course. Great to be with y'all. Great to see y'all. Yeah, so to respond to that question, is there an invasion? And then to speak a little bit about what's happened vis-a-vis militarization since the administration started. In terms of arrivals to the border right now, there's a couple things I think to keep in mind. First, the arrivals have gone down rather significantly. We're talking about arrivals at the U.S.-Mexico border that, are, the lowest that they've been in a long time. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for that. Migration to the U.S.-Mexico border, it goes through cycles. There are peaks and troughs, and we're in a period right now when migration just might be down to our border. But it's also, I think, important to realize that there's also some policy choices that we've made as a country that have resulted in that. The militarization that we've seen at our U.S.-Mexico border has really very, very successfully been exported southward. So if you look at, Panama right now, the U.S. government has really worked with the government in Panama and other countries in the region in South America too, like Costa Rica, to really make it extremely hard for anyone coming up from South America to make it to Central America and then to make it northbound. We're also seeing similar activity in Mexico. There's the deployment of Mexican authorities throughout the country, in the north and the south and the interior, to also stop migration. El Paso, we're right on the border with Ciudad Juarez. That's our sister city on the other side. And there's a significant operation of the Mexican government to to disrupt migration flows there too. So you also have to keep that in mind. Even though, yes, we may be in a period right now when the migration flows are low, our government has gotten really, really good at cooperating with other governments in the region to arrest migration through many of the same policies that we've seen here at the border. Now, there's another thing that's important to when we're talking about flows at the border to note. Really, what the president was able to achieve, President Trump, really on day one at the border in terms of dismantling asylum, it's quite extraordinary and quite astonishing. He was able to achieve within minutes what he hadn't done in 4 years of a first term. There were people here at the US-Mexico border in El Paso that had appointments to begin their asylum process. And while the president was offering his inauguration speech at the Capitol, the system of asylum had been completely dismantled and people were being turned away. So I don't think that we can underestimate the speed and the depth. The border is completely shut to asylum seekers right now. There is no system of asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border at all. And again, that didn't happen in 4 years of the first Trump administration. So in terms of the policy decision to dismantle asylum, and there are legal challenges to it that are underway in the courts, but effectively it's over. It's over. We've also seen since the president was inaugurated here at the border, here in my part of the border, the deployment of additional military personnel. So over 1,000 troops have arrived. The area from El Paso going about 170 miles west of us into New Mexico has been declared by the border a military zone. So it's now in control of the military. That's unprecedented. And then the area going east of us into West Texas, 53 miles east of us, has also been declared a military zone. So the area in Texas is now under the control of Fort Bliss. The area west of us in New Mexico is now under control of the military in Arizona. So they've basically created 2 fictional military bases at the US-Mexico border, east and west of El Paso, quite unprecedented, and where the military are engaging, US military are engaging in enforcement actions against people who are crossing the border. That's unprecedented, and it raises significant concerns when you have US military personnel applying US law on US soil. There's a law, posse comitatus. There's a history of kind of caution in the United States against that, because that can be quite dangerous once you entrust the military with police functions. So it's quite significant what's happened. And then there are a host of other things. The refugee program is over. Many foreign assistance programs intended to mitigate migration are over. The sensitive locations policy, which affects us in El Paso in a particular way for some historical reasons, which maybe we can talk about later, has also been reversed. So it's been quite significant. I don't think that we can underestimate what's happened, and it far exceeds anything that we saw in the first term. Oh, Sarah, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Thanks for that snapshot. I do want to get back to the, sort of the legal strategy behind all of this with the posse comitatus, is that how you pronounce it? And other things, other strategies that are being employed. But let's pass now to James, because he's in the next sector west of you. And James, if you could confirm yes or no, if you've seen an invasion, and then follow that up with what you're seeing in terms of militarization, particularly as you are in that newly militarized zone called the Roosevelt Reservation.
Hi there. My mic is on?
Yeah, we hear you.
I've got Abby Carpenter here with me. She's my partner and co-leader in the battalion. Yes, there's an invasion of border surveillance, of misinformation, of government agency resistance. So yeah, no, it's not this invasion that is projected and promoted. Certainly not. And I kind of welcome us to maybe think about some different language. We're always modifying our language and adapting our language to try to counter these narratives, and maybe we should call it an infusion or an influx or an injection as our country seems to need, as it has this sickness, of hate and dehumanizing folks. We need an infusion. But yeah, we do work on the ground there in just west of El Paso in this Sunland Park, Santa Teresa area. It's an extremely deadly area right now. I've worked in Arizona for 7 years, and now we do both. But we're really putting a lot of focus on this area west of El Paso. In a very small area, just to give folks some context, 10 by 20 miles on the New Mexico border. Several hundred people have been found dead in that area. The shocking statistic here is, though, that over half of them are women. This is double the borderland average of
20 to 30%.
20 to 30%. Yeah, it's at 55 to 60%. Over 100 women in less than 2 years have been found in this small area west of El Paso, Sunland Park, Santa Teresa area, where we work, and we search every month. And we are staffed predominantly by women volunteers that are led by women like Abby, and are finding women in the desert. So yeah, this aggressive, when people say why, we attribute it to several factors. I think the aggressive enforcement in Texas that we've seen, and well, it's sold as kind of a short route and a safer passage, but it's the desert. It's still very deadly. Yeah, we watch and monitor all this military buildup. We report new surveillance to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who is tracking and publicizing all the military buildup. We have a new blimp, Zeppelin, just west of El Paso there, tactical aerostat blimp. And of course, the politicians showed up and sold it as a life-saving measure, which is a load of crap. This is more militarization. It pushes people further out into the desert. It's a extension of this prevention through deterrence policy and mentality. So yeah, we track that type of stuff, and we are seeing more and more of it every day, as well as the Army, the six-wheeled dune buggy, Stryker personnel carriers, and the refueling tanks at the Santa Teresa Border Patrol Station. And yeah, it's gotten very intense, and we've been chased off of that zone now. And as Dylan said, it's not just this Roosevelt Reservation, this 60 feet, this border wall road in New Mexico. It's expanded, ranging from a half mile to 4 miles inland from the border, as he said, about 85 miles west to this place called Hachita, where New Mexico dips down and creates that little boot heel, as we call it. And down there in that beautiful, beautiful area of New Mexico in the southwest, the government's taken over roughly 3 to 3.5 mile band. And that land won't come back. folks. That's government land. It's BLM land, our land, and then it's going to be. I'm sure it's going to be gone for good. And many will say that they've chosen this area as a bit of a test bed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Do you want to mention that?
Only because New Mexico is so lightly populated, and we're a poor state, and so they might be using this as a trial to see how well the militarization goes, and then expand it out to other states.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is something I definitely want to get to when we speak with America, who's been witness to Greg Abbott's militarization. And I'm wondering how much of that was sort of the prequel to what we're seeing now. As you said, the experimentation. I understand that there's a 400 square mile military installation. What you're talking about, the mileage, from the border north, ultimately is 400 square miles, I think, in New Mexico, all along the border. But this is this military zone, right? Goes all the way to the Pacific Ocean, does it not?
It does.
It does. And sorry, am I cutting into Americas?
No, it's okay. Keep going.
Um, that few hundred miles would represent just the 60 feet. Okay.
Oh.
But in Mexico, we are looking at they've said 177,000 acres. My estimate is closer to 300,000 acres.
Wow.
That have been taken away. Yeah, that much. And there's an additional 12,000 acre chunk right in this middle of this area that we've searched almost every month. So no, we're talking hundreds of thousands of acres that have now been taken over, transferred from BLM to the U.S. Army, and are these exclusion zones. Of course, the judge in Las Cruces has been throwing out the cases, but they're responding to those reasons for throwing the cases out, the signage and so forth. Every 300 feet now, we're seeing the signs. And yeah, things are ramping up really quickly down there.
Well, I think it's really, really important, the point you make, that this is a genie that cannot be rebottled. And once you take these lands, they're not being given back, even though they say this is just for 3 years or something like that. It's the same story with the bill that was just passed in the House that includes enough money to expand the detention system from roughly 41,500 beds to 120,000 beds. Once that happens, they're not going to shrink it down to 41,000 again, and that's already too much. So yeah, these things are genies that are not rebottled. But the other point that you made is that you've been out there searching for folks in distress or who have unfortunately succumbed to the elements. And for those who aren't, who might not know, this is a strategy, prevention through deterrence. I call it deterrence through cruelty, that began under Clinton, and with Operation Gatekeeper deliberately blocked off easier to cross passages, such as in El Paso, in San Diego, in urban areas, to deliberately funnel people into the most harsh and difficult to pass terrain, because they thought the threat of mortal peril in these circumstances would deter people from coming. And it's obviously never worked. It's been going on since October 1st, 1995, so 30 years, and it's never ever worked. It's only killed more people every year. And so now with this military zone, James and Abby, how does that harm folks even more? And how does it interfere with your work? Because my understanding now is that you can't just get criminalized for crossing without inspection, you're now potentially criminalized for trespassing. That must apply to you as well.
It does. Currently, the media is talking about the hunters and the hikers and people that recreate in the area. Of course, we're concerned about what we do in that area and our access. We shift in the summer to driving the border wall road west of Santa Teresa, and we do water handoffs where we hand water. There's folks on the other side, and we call out, and they appear, and we hand water directly to them. And that's gone. We can't do that any longer, or unless I don't see that happening. We're not permitted into that area. So yeah, there's a direct impact. We have immigration attorneys as volunteers that are fearful about entering these zones, and we have to be conscious of that and the safety and of our volunteers.
Yeah, I want to add that there's a proposed military strip that runs north and south from the border up to a train junction and an airport, a small airport, and we do so much searching in there. And if we're prohibited from going in there, then hope this is not too graphic, but those remains are going to disappear. They get scattered, they get buried, they get taken underground by animals. And if we're prevented, then how many of those people that might have been identified and found their way home are going to be lost because we're prevented because of fear of being arrested ourselves?
Let me put it this way real quick. Europe has its oceans where migrants and refugees disappear. We have our desert.
Yeah.
Right? And they also disappear there, albeit a little bit slower, but the desert makes them disappear. It is weaponized and it is very efficient. The animals, the environment, it consumes people. And so these folks are hunted to death, then abandoned, and nature takes its course and they are disappeared. In Europe, you have these emergency zones in Poland and in Greece that the governments have imposed. This is exactly the same, and it's removing us from the picture. It is removing the witnesses, of which there are very few already. There are very, very few witnesses in the borderlands. Forensic anthropologists, and many estimate that we are only finding 20% of the deceased in the borderlands. That 80% are going unrecovered, undiscovered, unidentified. So this capturing of these critical areas and removing us from the picture, it just takes more eyes off of it, and it removes that opportunity for accountability. And
Yes.
I mean, my goodness, just the location and recovery of our neighbors. Okay,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all quite strategic when we step back and look at it, I believe.
I believe you're right. I also will make a note, and then I'm going to shift to Dora. That death in the desert is one of the most excruciating ways to die. And I've detailed it in the conclusion of Crossing the Line, which is one of the chapters I recommended folks read for this meeting. So Dora, shifting to you now, because you are one of those people who's experienced these horrors by virtue of being forced into the desert for your crossing, but more importantly now, as somebody who's herself out there saving lives and providing aid, what has been your experience of the last 3 months of this upsurge, this tsunami of militarization in the Tucson zone of the sector of the borderlands? What's different today than even 3 months ago?
So I want to confirm with you, as the question was, have you see invasion? And I agree with James that we need to change that, the word, because of course we have not. And I have said that from day one. As in 2023, that's when we have had the large numbers of people coming to this country seeking safety from all over the world. Times during in the borderlands, we had people from 15 countries in one morning coming to this country, and yet it was no invasion. What I really saw was people trusting this country, coming to this country and exercise their rights. I saw people desperate. I saw people also grateful that they had made it over here and now they were going to be safe, they thought. So, it's such a different narrative. It's such a different way to see what really is happening in our borderlands. But I agree with James. What we have seen over and over is the invasion of militarization, and not only physically, a man with a weapon and big tanks, but also those cameras, also the surveillance cameras. They have been around for a very long time. So that is the invasion into our borderlands. And not only, we have to think also about the communities next to the borderlands. I mean, there's people that live in those areas. They are so proud and love their communities, and our sister towns, our sister communities. Like, for example, in the area of Arizona in Sassaville, Sonora, it is next to Sassaville, Arizona, where we have the 22-mile wall. And, behind the ugly wall, really, it is a beautiful community who has suffered also, from the organized crime, that they had to become refugees to this country. And even with that, it's never been that picture where, I mean, come on, I search and search for the word invasion, and it brings so much fear to me because it is people coming in military and rushing and killing each other and attacking and all that, and it's nothing like that I have ever seen in 40 years in the borderlands, and not even at this past month or past years. So that is totally misinformed, and it's so sad that that particular word was ingrained in people's mind and people's living rooms and people's lives. That's what we needed to protect this country, because we were going to be attacked from the invaders.
Mhm.
Invaders were little ones coming all the way from Africa and Mauritania and in America with their parents, from Afghanistan seeking refuge and waiting in line in 110 degrees 4 or 5 hours until Border Patrol will pick them up and taken to be processed. So it was nothing ever out of order. It was not even when we were providing them a bottle of water or a granola bar, they were attacking anybody. They were waiting for their
Right.
turn. So in our borderlands right now, what we have is one or two tanks. I mean, it's really not that many that we can say, oh gosh, they're here. But what we see is a lot of threats and hate from Border Patrol. They are exercising their power to us humanitarian aid, saying you can no longer be here. Like Jane was saying, we were also passing water bottles to people on the other side, on the Mexican side, because they were about to cross. We no longer can do that because we will be prosecuted, and we have been told. So it can vary. You can find a nice agent that says thank you for what you're doing, and then in the next couple miles you can find another one that say you get the hell out of here or I'm going to arrest you. So they don't have their really set protocols how to treat humanitarian aids or people. But there is nothing to, an invasion in here, but it's a lot of uncertainty how things are going to develop. So now in the area of Nogales, Sonora, and Nogales, Arizona, it has been this work done by National Guard from Mexico and National Guard from the United States, dismantling the check lookout points they call. So the smugglers, the human traffickers, set up stations where they keep an eye when the border patrol is coming or holding people there in the Mexican side. But now they're collaborated because they brag about it in all the channels in our area, saying that they're no longer there because they got together and the United States went on the other side in Mexico and helped to destroy those camps.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Um,
they're collaborating, right? From south to north.
yeah, so getting back to Dylan's comment that the border has really just been pushed all the way to Panama at this point. Before I move over to the Texas crew on the call, Katrina had a question. Does the Roosevelt Reservation military zone skip the borderline on the Tohono O'odham Nation? What's the relationship with this buildup and the nation? Anyone from Arizona? Dora, you're muted.
Well, I don't really have a lot of good information on that because it's really not my area where I've been providing humanitarian aid, and I think we have a lot of good Samaritans here. They might be able to share a little bit, or James, because he's been in the area. But as far as I know, that Tohono O'odham, um, or the community in governmental people has said, we were not going to allow militarization in our land.
Mhm.
That's something we are not going to let this happen. But on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, they're so vulnerable too. The border patrol is there killing people in their own lands with no justice. So I don't think they have a lot of power against this federal government.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. Absolutely. Um, so I want to shift gears here, because, well, let's all agree to accept James' reframing that the invasion is coming from north to south, and it is our own troops, our sheriffs, our National Guard, our militias and vigilantes that can buy, Border Patrol and ICE uniforms on Amazon. And even the president has truthed, what do you call it, what he does these days? Maybe he's back on Twitter. I don't know anymore. Said on March 5th, I think, so a couple of years ago, months ago, that the border crossings are down 95%. So clearly there are not people coming up seeking safety anymore unless they are trying to get across through the desert. But we do have this continued buildup and the continual narrative of, there this need to react to some kind of an invader. So it begs the question, what are they really doing here? And I think Dylan, you started to touch on that. Oh no, it was you, Abby. What is really the motivation here? I've read that this is about changing the rules about how the military operates and is afraid to operate. We've seen this before in my book. I caution folks that in the summer of 2020, during the Black Lives Matter protests, Trump harnessed CBP and ICE as his own personal police in DC and in Portland, Oregon. It can happen again. So I'd love to turn the conversation now to what might be this really behind this military effort, and turn to America now to tell us what she witnessed as a resident of Eagle Pass, Texas, during the Biden administration, where we had a military buildup. And then I want to invite Dylan to add from his perspective in El Paso too. But America, what did can you explain to us? Can you tell us, illustrate for us what you saw in terms of this military buildup under Greg Abbott during the Biden administration that may have been experimentation and a prelude to what we're now seeing all across the borderlands?
Absolutely. And the first thing I would say is follow the money. In the state of Texas, we had Operation Lone Star that was launched in 2021 as a response to the Biden administration. Abbott basically said, if you're not going to enforce immigration law, Abbott, in Texas, will do so. But what happened was really interesting is that he transferred public taxpayer dollars into private hands. He declared a disaster, which now I've seen Trump do the same thing. And then once the disaster meant that he no longer had to follow procurement processes, contracts no longer had to be publicly available and vetted and a certain date posted and everything else, then the money just started to flow. We also saw that they took the individual sheriffs and they got them on their side with they're flat out bribes. I know it came from the government to the government, but Kinney County is a tiny community, about 3,000 people, and they got over $400 million in Operation Lone Star funds, which is mind-boggling. Overall, Texas has spent over $11 billion on border militarization, and contracts are going to everybody. I mentioned the sheriff offices in different border communities. It's also going to private prison companies like Geo Group, defense contractors. Here in Eagle Pass, they built an entire base between February of 2024 and Memorial Day of 2024, an entire base. And the crazy thing is the state of Texas does not own this $100 million base. It's actually owned by a group called Team Housing Solutions out of College Station, who then rent it back to the Texas government at a rate of $14 million a month. So the soldiers that were stationed in Maverick County were staying in hotels and also Airbnbs. They were eating in restaurants, and many of our restaurants are locally owned. They're not chain restaurants, and it was a bit of a boom for the city of Eagle Pass. Abbott came in with the announcement of this base and said, we're going to save money every month because they're going to be staying on the base and we can control costs. Well, what happened was instead of the taxpayer dollars going to the people of Texas, he channeled those taxpayer dollars right back to one of his biggest campaign funders. But really what I think the biggest danger here is normalizing the military presence in civilian life. So I want to go back. I know I'm speaking a bit more than a minute, but the Posse Comitatus Act dates back to 1878, and it's a foundational law that was passed after Reconstruction when federal troops were used to police the South, and it bred resentment and abuse. And the thing is that when we blur the line between military and law enforcement, we actually threaten democracy. Military is trained for war, not policing, and when we use the military on U.S. soil, then we're violating civil liberties. We have the risks of escalating violence, and we politicize our armed forces. And we have a critical safeguard that's been in place for well over 100 years, and it needs to stay in place. And what we're seeing is the erosion of boundaries, They're kind of saying, like, okay, is there pushback? Whenever there's pushback, they go and say, oh, I was just joking. You misinterpreted. You're overreacting. But if we don't react to these things, then they push even further. Here in Eagle Pass, Texas, we lost our park, Shelby Park. We had no access to the park except for the border vigil for well over a year. We kept pushing. We kept making a fuss. The state of Texas, the National Guard, abandoned the gates. It's like, great. give us back our riverfront, give us back our boat ramp. Because if we don't demand it, power is not going to cede any ground at all.
Mm-hmm. Well stated. Thank you. Yeah, I was in Del Rio when 15,000 Haitians just poof suddenly appeared. Um, and I was there when Greg Abbott had to strong arm Mayor Bruno to declare an emergency so he could take over. And he did. Bruno, said, okay. And the bridge was closed, and throughout the night, I spent the entire night right at the border wall watching all these sirens and vehicles and cars and helicopters, and it was just crazy. It really did feel like the it felt and sounded like the beginning of a war, a big, the like build up before attack. And the next morning when the sun came out, there was, y'all will probably remember, a line of about 700 to 1,000 state troopers and sheriffs and border patrol and all of their vehicles lined up along the waterfront there to stop more people from crossing. And it was just so unnecessary and so expensive and so lacking in compassion. It was just made for Fox TV. So I've seen what these emergency declarations can do. Um, Dylan, can we pass back to you as you brought this theme up to begin with, and also given in your context of El Paso being surrounding Fort Bliss, which my understanding is about the size of the state of Delaware. And now we have buildup of militarization as well, east of the city, all the way to Big Ben. I've been to Big Ben. People don't cross there. I mean, maybe one or, the random one does here or there, but it's just the territory is just too harsh. You can't really cross there. So take it away. What do you think is happening? What is the ulterior motive of this buildup? Because it's certainly not to stop, the random person on the move anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, the question of why, it's a good question. And I think it's there's a long historical arc to this question. If you want to answer the question, I think you have to look back to history. I mean, where we are in El Paso, we're in Mexico, like most of the U.S.-Mexico, like all of the U.S.-Mexico border, until the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe. With that treaty, following the U.S.-Mexico War, all of the southern border became part of the United States. And I think you started out talking about, racial profiling. And when you think about invasion and sort of the complexities of that word, and well, invasion from whom? Is it an invasion from the south, or is it an invasion up from the north? People have been talking about an invasion ever since then to justify a certain racialized enforcement of the area. The people here at the border, people of Mexican origin, were classified as foreigners, following the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe, and enforcement was racialized. We have a legacy of racialized enforcement, and that's not gone away. You think about Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss it's the largest, as I said, the largest military base in the Western Hemisphere, but it's been here since 1877. And the reason it's here is because commercial interests took away access to the salt flats. So the local community used to have access to salt. There was communal access to salt for food and for livestock. And it was commercialized by big business interests. And so the US government sent the soldiers here in 1877, and they never left. And so you see sort of the intersection, not only of this racialized administration of the border, but also an intersection with commercial interests. And that continues to be today when we think about, things like detention and everything that America talked about as well. So there's a financial it's sort of like an enchilada. There's a racialized politics and a racialized approach to immigration enforcement. There are commercial and financial interests. There's also the fact that just as a country, we haven't really decided what we want to do at the border and on immigration policy. On the one hand, as a country, we're very generous, in terms of there are many immigrants who come to our country who are able to effectively integrate into our country. Immigrants are the lifeblood of this country that contribute socially and historically and economically to our country. We've been able to integrate many refugees from around the world, and many people have been able to access asylum at the US-Mexico border. On the other hand, we have this very dark history of a racialized immigration enforcement. We have backlashes against immigrants. We scapegoat immigrants. And so we have this bipolar attitude towards immigration in this country. And into that space, what happens over and over again, ever since the 19th century, is you have people who are willing to deploy a politics of exclusion to gain political points, often for economic reasons again. People like our president who exploit that. And I think we have to resolve that tension. The latest example of that, and it's very significant, is the House just passed a very, very, very brutal immigration enforcement law, essentially, with that's part of the reconciliation package. It's $160 billion for detention and deportation, more money for border wall, more money for detention, more money for additional ICE enforcement agents. So we just this machine, in the absence of fixing this, it just metastasizes. And as you said, it's sort of you can't get the genie back in the bottle. And so there's an urgency, I think, that we address this. And then we face down the racialized history as a country once and for all.
Yes, which is feeling farther and farther away, less and less manageable, but maybe not. Maybe there's some hope in the extremes they're taking because it's waking people up. America says that one of her theories in the chat is that the underlying goal or a potential strategy is to make the public accept soldiers as cops, drones as surveillance tools, and rhetoric like invasion as justification for authoritarian policies. That doesn't necessarily square with your economic theory, but speaks more to this other theory that I am posing, that this is a way to change the rules about how the military operates and do away with the posse comitatus. What do you think about that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, social control, the use of military for social control, the use of militarization for social control, whether you talk about immigration or the war on drugs or the war on the poor, that has a long history in the United States as well. And
Yes.
I think it's certainly a part of it. Just recently, the administration decided, because there's been such a steep drop in the number of persons arriving to the border, that they're going to take Border Patrol agents and deploy them throughout the country.
Yeah.
So that's another, it's not the military, but the deployment of they've already said that they're going to deploy Border Patrol agents to assist ICE, and they're going to be, not in Border Patrol uniforms, but they are going to be assisting in ICE operations. In addition to, we already know the US Marshals and the FBI and HSI are also engaging in these operations. So we're taking this complex here at the border, and we're now turning it on the population in the interior. And I think it's reflecting that strategy that you talk about. Yeah,
I agree 100%. Abby, you also brought up the use of your area, your sector of the borderlands as an experiment for greater expansion. Do you want to speak more on that?
I gotta go.
I'm sorry, I did a question. Jaime was playing with the phone. Ask it again.
You spoke about your sector, what's going on in your sector, potentially being experimentation for some, more greater expansion to come. Do you want to speak more about that on that topic?
Only I can speak about what we've seen, which is each time we go down there, we sort of test the waters by going into a zone where we're not allowed to see if the Border Patrol are asking us to leave. That's starting to change. They're starting to ask us to leave. We also come upon, as Jaime said, those striker vehicles with the military in them. And sometimes they wave at us, and other times we see nothing. So we're not really sure. The signs that would be impossible to read from the Mexico side of the wall. You would have to have binoculars in Mexico to read the sign, and it's very much of it is in legalese. Are they going to move those closer to the border? In that case, then they will have a legal right to prosecute these people. And then Jaime and I keep wondering when one of us are going to be the test case and get arrested, because we are where we are not supposed to be. But sort of pushing that to find out at what point are they going to say humanitarians are not allowed in this area. That to me, that's as Jaime said, James said, they do that in Europe. They have criminalized humanitarian aid. And we want to make sure that if they do that, that gets publicized, because that would be horrendous.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I wanted you to go, because yes, the other parallel to all of this is making it harder and harder and harder to exercise humanitarianism, both with withdrawal of funds as well as criminalization, but now just basically taking away your access. I forced myself to listen to the interview with JD Vance that was published on the Daily this week. And he's convinced, right, that there is violence all along the border, in border towns all across the country, and that, the military must be there to cut down on the violence. Now, I'm a believer in more guns mean more violence. They don't mean less violence. But it's also just such a bold-faced lie. And of course, a lie that's being disseminated through the Fox News ecosystem. So I'd love to hear from all of you again. Are your little towns violent? And how do we push back and send the message, beyond north of the 100-mile border point checkpoint, that no, there really isn't violence in these border towns. Anybody? I open that up to all y'all.
Yeah, I mean, back to your first question, Eagle Pass is not under invasion. It's a political myth designed to justify the militarization. And then Eagle Pass is one of the safest towns in the entire United States. Violent crime is lower than the state average. And even when we don't have them now, even when we had migrants in the community, they are not the threats that politicians claim. Many of them barely stayed long enough to charge their phone before they were on a bus or paying an Uber driver to take them to San Antonio to the airport. So no, we are not seeing violence. We are not seeing violent crime. If anything, more violence is coming from the militarization here on the border, the high-speed chases that are prompted. Last night, I went to a memorial for Uvalde, for Robb Elementary. Robb Elementary was shut down, or Uvalde schools in total were shut down more than 40 times because of Operation Lone Star high-speed chases through Uvalde. And so we had a situation kind of where the boy that cried wolf, the schools shut down so many times that people kind of took it for granted. And then when something actually did happen, they had nearly 400 officers show up, and they stood there for over an hour. The death toll was as high as it was. 19 students, 2 teachers, and then the husband of one of the teachers had a heart attack when he found out his wife had been killed. The death toll was so high because all of these soldiers, all of these Department of Public Safety officers, all of these Border Patrol officers, multiple sheriff's offices did nothing. They did nothing. We need to focus on common sense gun laws that will make us safer. We need to focus on investing, revitalizing our border communities, and not militarization. We are not violent. We never have been. And that's an absolute total lie that's being put forward to justify stealing taxpayer dollars and taking away our civil and human rights.
There you go. That's the crux of it. Joyce in the RGV is saying the only violence is between local citizens.
Right. What we see here is no different from what we've always seen. There's no surge of violence from people from south of the border. We didn't see it when we had thousands of people coming in a quite a managed, order with all the shelters on both sides working together and processing people through bus stations and so forth. And as America said, they're heading north out of the area. That's never been, certainly in my experience, never been an issue here. And I think at one point, McAllen, which is about 70 miles to the west of where I am in Harlingen, boasted one of the safest cities in the United States and has continued to. So it really is an amazing false narrative that has been built up to levels where we have, well, of course, now with the current Trump administration, we have people in his cabinet. I don't know if they actually believe what they're saying,
Yeah.
or if they ingrained it so deeply, this narrative into their minds, that it doesn't matter what they actually see. It's their reality now. I don't know if it's that, or they're just really good at lying. Can I say that word? I
You
mean,
may.
um, it's actually viscerally painful, having been part of the effort to bring people across humanely years ago, to see my colleagues being taken to court by the Texas Attorney General
Yep.
with accusations of smuggling people, which is just completely alien. So, I have a lot of emotion over it. And truly, when the ICE agents started invading this area, that's when I felt like there was an invasion. Honestly, I felt it, saw it at intersections on the house, the roads near my house. Saw it in the neighboring community between here and Laguna Vista at Abby's Bakery in Los Fresnos. I mean, you can see it all the time here. So that's the invasion from what I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And the where once upon a time the Southwest borderlands lived a reality in parallel with this false narrative, now we're seeing it all over the country.
Yeah.
So there's
Right.
that. All right,
Mhm.
Andrea, you have a question. Please come off mute. Or a statement.
Oh, just to add to what Joyce is saying. One is that one of our board members of Team Brownsville has mentioned that she feels that she and other members of the Latino community are being targeted by both police and ICE. I would say that it's not being as publicized here on the border as it is in other places in the country. We were with a church group today getting meals ready for homeless individuals that live in downtown Brownsville, and we kind of discussed that a bit and talked about the fact that yes, there are raids going on. Yes, there are people that are getting stopped. It's not coming out in the newspaper. It's not coming out on the media as much as in other places. But no, there's no invasion going on here. There are people, living their lives on both sides of the border. There are certainly people living in a lot of pain on the other side of the border, on the Mexico side, because they are trying to figure out what's next for them, whether their family will stay in Mexico, whether they'll go back to another country. So those are all questions that people have.
Yes. Madeline, I think you had a question for Dylan, a link to Panama. Do you want to come off mute and ask or share?
No, I just was saying that I would like to investigate a bit more since I'm now spending a lot of time in Panama, and I'm going to try to contact a group that's working there. So if he knows of a group there, I would appreciate a contact name, number.
Dylan, do you know anybody in Panama?
Yeah, there's a good group of Claretian missionaries that work right at the Gap, and I can hand off that contact to Sarah, and you can pass it on.
Perfect.
That'd be, thank you.
All right, we have about 15 minutes left, and Dora and I would like to steal about 5 minutes of that to make a couple of announcements. Miriam also has some news. So any more questions? Any more comments? Or any more observations from your corner of the borderlands that we, haven't touched upon yet? Please raise your hand or just come off mute.
I just want to share real quick that as we continue with this false narrative of invasion, the real invasion is happening in our communities to our people. The invasion of ICE in our courtrooms, the invasion of policing and their streets, from the sheriff to the police, stopping people and then calling and working in cahoot with the border patrol and calling ICE to deport people immediately. Of course, as we know, without their process. So for me, it's very important to remind everybody in your own communities to organize. And one of the most important things that we can do as people in solidarity with its families, people who care, people who is in this community, is to accompany them to their court hearings, because we need to be witness of this. We need to bear witness. And of course, we cannot get in the middle, because they will push us in. If you want to, you want to. But we've seen it here in Phoenix, Arizona, last week, where a group of one organization went and witnessed the arrest of so many families. They were going, even children, after their court hearing. The scary part is that a lot of these big men, they are covered, all their faces covered. You cannot see them, their eyes, their face, and they do not have anything that identify them as an ICE agent. So that is very scary, because to me, it really looks like kidnapping in front of our eyes to someone, because we don't even know where these people is now. We don't even know where their families are. So it is very important that all of us are vigilant in our communities and continue to find a way to support families that have a court hearing, because that's where they're doing this invasion. That's where they are kidnapping people in front of our eyes in this moment.
Yeah, I think we keep what we've been dancing around for the last hour anyway, is that this is looking more and more like rule by fascism. There's no rules, no accountability, ICE officers in balaclavas, showing up and abducting people out of their court hearing. And my understanding in the folks in Phoenix is they were told that their cases were closed. Now, maybe that was the officers of the court lying to them and setting them up for abduction. Or, does that mean that their asylum cases were actually won and then they were still abducted and disappeared? Like, none of this is okay. And
Right,
Miriam,
but we need to remember, I'm sorry, Sarah, but this
That's
is
okay.
important for us to know that even if their case was rejected in the moment, they lost their asylum in the moment, they still have 30 days to appeal. So
Exactly.
they're still continuing in their process if our dual process works. But at this moment, it's not working. It's how they, yeah.
Miriam has asked a great question. Our courts seem to be the only hope, unless the government just decides to flout what the court orders are. But does anyone know if there have been any legal challenges to the explosive border militarization that has taken place over the last 3 months?
I'm going to jump in on this one here. I heard this when I first got started, and it was activism. Activism is faster than litigation. Litigation is faster than legislation. So yes, we
Yeah.
do need to challenge this in the courts, but also we need to show up. If we can mobilize 3.5% of our population, we can affect change. And we have to show up. We have to be present in physical spaces because the power will only yield to pressure. Stand where the cameras can see you, at the border, at contractor headquarters, at politicians' offices. Document. People behave differently when that camera is on them, especially if you say, this is on Facebook Live right now. Share the truth when media won't. The other thing is, I'm finding people will not believe what they see on TV, but if you tell me, I filmed this with my own camera, then people go, wow. The other thing is, if you film, take pictures all along, because I've had people look through the photo, and I'm like, here's what I was doing before, here's where it happened, here's what was going on afterwards. And they'll use that to just verify that when they look. So protest, document, disrupt. If you have privilege, use it. Whether it be citizenship, I have citizenship, be it social capital. In my case, it's location. I am from the border. I grew up here. I'm using that voice as often as I can. If you have legal protections, shield the vulnerable, but also amplify their voices. And I really have to appreciate Sarah for giving me the chance here to amplify my voice. And organize. Everything you do, be like, who wants to go with me? Send a text message. If you've got empty spaces in the car, work to fill those so that you're not doing this by yourself. And I don't know what group you have present, but you need to be present in the physical space, because the National Guard soldiers that are here in Eagle Pass did not come from Eagle Pass. They got sent to us from Wyoming. They got sent to us from Louisiana. They got sent to us from New Hampshire. So where you are with what you have, you can change what's happening for me here in Eagle Pass on the border.
Bravo. Thank you, America. Yes, the resistance is growing. I loved your framing. Can you say it again? I've been using resist, refuse, reclaim. But I'm coming more from like the writer framework. What were the words you used?
Protest, document, disrupt,
There we go.
organize.
Fantastic. These are all really great framings for all that we have to do to support our brothers and sisters right now. Yeah. All right. We've got some announcements. But how about James and Dylan? Do you want to have a last word on this notion of resistance and how to aid and be an ally? What Gina Muscatel is on the call. We were together in LA in early April, and one of the panelists with us there from Freedom for Immigrants has been preferring to use the name accomplice, the word accomplice versus ally. I think that's pretty good. But anyway, any other tips for being an ally or an accomplice?
Sure. I will just add that I I just love everything that America says. And
Yes.
thank you. And I just wanted to also talk about information and using different methods to fight misinformation, um, art, social media, lobbying, direct action. I wrote down writing, of course, the new forms like Substack that so many of you are using, and traditional book, and essays and literature, and these organizing indivisible groups. We have one here in our little town of Silver City, New Mexico, and I'd encourage folks to look up and download stuff like this. This is the Electronic Frontier Foundation's surveillance zine, they call it, like as in magazine. It's free at EFF.org. And look up the, this new New Mexico migrant mortality map. It's powerful. I was just looking at data last night, and like America said, there's so many pursuit fatalities, and I can absolutely confirm that looking at the data last night. It was just like one after the other: pursuit, blunt force trauma, falling from the wall due to pursuit. And but these tools are really powerful, and a lot of folks, even within the humanitarian community, are not familiar with them. Pull them up, download them, share them. It's powerful information that you never know what it might trigger from somebody else within your group or within your organization, even if it's not directly related at that immediate moment. So anyway, my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I love that. I put in a link to our last workshop, which was a month ago. We meet every fourth Sunday, and that was on language and the use of language, which is another very important, we think, like using invasion to refer to the military, not to folks in need of humanitarian compassion. And you're triggering this idea, James, that maybe we should compile all these resources. I'm happy to host them on my website and make sure that that folks are always left with a list of resources. And speaking of which, now for announcements. Miriam has a workshop coming up on sanctuary, which was our first webinar in March, when we talked about the original sanctuary movement and how we might need to revitalize it today to harbor people and keep them from harm. Our next meeting is going to be a celebration. We've got great news. On July 5th, Dora's memoir is going to hit bookstores and Amazon all over the country. And we want to have a pre-launch publishing party to help give that book a lift. So we invite you all to join us on June 22nd to celebrate her book. Abby, I hope you'll be with us, because Abby was a big part of helping launch Dora's book. And my book is getting a second edition. My book will be 1 year old on June 18th. And my publisher just announced they're going to do a new edition in light of the fact that though I was writing history, it turned into be more as much crystal ball gazing as historical chronicle. So they're going to put out a new edition. So June 22 in this space, come on down, and Dora and I are going to put on our author's hats and talk about our books and encourage all of y'all to help spread the news about our books in your communities by, we hope, developing your own book clubs or your own book study groups, starting with our books and then potentially moving into others, hundreds of which are in my bibliography on my website. So we hope that you'll join us for that. And then Miriam has, like I said, her June, what is it, Miriam? Do you want to come off and tell us about that?
Yes, it's on June 8th. I put the link in the chat.
Okay.
And maybe Sarah, there's some other way we could post the flyer.
Sure.
But basically, I'm going to be talking about the history of the sanctuary movement, the 1980s movement. It's sponsored by my local Quaker meeting, so I'm going to be having kind of a Quaker emphasis on what the Quakers are doing and looking at currently what's going on with the sanctuary movement, and what the lessons from what happened in the 1980s movement can teach us for activism today.
Fantastic. I'll be there. So, Dora, back over to you, my friend. Do you want to give us some final words and close us out? Unless any of our panelists have anything more they wish to say. No, okay. Dora dear?
Um, oh my gosh, I never want this hour and a half or 2 hours to end because it's so,
No.
it feels so good to be in community, And as I always share with everybody that I have the opportunity to speak about our work, about our missions and vision and what we do every single day. Really, our families need to be empowered. The families that are surrounding us, that we helping them. Please, please always give them the love that we are good to do. And, in Tucson, Arizona, we are hosting almost 70 families from everywhere, and they're calling Tucson home now. So our job pretty much is to make sure that they know that they're not alone, that we're here with them. And that is one of the important job that we can do at this moment. And it makes you feel so good because it doesn't matter if the sky is falling down on us. If we are next to these children, these families, if I guarantee to you that your day is going to be better. So if you're far away and you're home and you cannot go at places, write letters, send them to us, to all these families, a word of hope, a word of, of something that resiliency, something that, hey, you're here, we're with you. It's just, that's how I operate because I cannot change this machine, but I can change what is in front of me. And it makes me feel better. Thank you, everybody, so much for being with us. And I hope Abby comes with us on the celebration because, yes, she is the foundation of my writing. She is pretty much the one. I just talk a lot. But thank you so much, everybody. Love you.
Yes, thank you. And remember what America said, it only takes 3.5%. And that, we're growing. I feel the resistance growing. We know how resilient our population can be. And even if we can't change things at this critical moment in historical time, we can be a billion, a trillion tiny grains of sand that thrown into the gears of this terrible machinery keep it from turning until these dark days are behind us. And when they are, we will be ready to rebuild something more beautiful, a more humane world out of the ashes. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being a part of our community. As Dora said, we just love these monthly meetups, and 90 minutes goes all too fast. So thank you for coming, and we'll hope to see you on June 22nd.
Thank you.
Feel free to come off mute and say goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
God
Sarah.
bless
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye,
Adios.
guys.
Bye-bye.
So
Bye.
much, Sarah and Dora and everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
Sarah.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Love you.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, God.
All right, Dora, stay on. I'm going to end the recording. If I can figure out how. There it is. Voila. Oh, she's gone.